For our raster overlay analysis demonstration, City of Sunset Valley officials have asked us to identify the best locations to site a new composting facility within the city limits. The facility must be located on public land, located on a site with little or no slope, located within close proximity to an existing street, and located as far as possible from streams. And they've asked us to use a suitability scale where 5 is best and 1 is worst. And if you look in the lower right-hand corner, you can see a diagram of the suitability analysis workflow, where first we define the goal, in this case, identify the best locations within Sunset Valley to site a new composting facility. Then we assimilate our criteria. So we need mappable layers that support their criteria. So land use, elevation, the location of streets and streams. And then in step 1 of our suitability modeling workflow, we need to standardize the geometry. So we're going to convert the land use, where general use ID equals 600, to a raster data set that's utilizing the same cell size as the input digital elevation model, which will serve as a standard geometry for our suitability analysis. Then we need to create a slope map using the digital elevation model, and then use distance accumulation to create a raster that reflects distance from the streets and another raster that reflects distance from the streams. Once we've standardized our geometry, now we need to standardize our values. So we need to convert the values for each of our input criteria using our suitability scale, where 5 is best and 1 is worst. Once we've standardized our input criteria, then we can weight them. In this case, they've asked us to weight all the criteria equally. Now we can combine our input criteria into a composite suitability index that shows us where sites are most suitable or least suitable for our proposed new composting facility. In step 1, we'll assimilate the criteria as mappable layers for our suitability analysis. First, we'll open a new ArcGIS Pro project named demo_3-2 in the demo folder. Then we'll add and symbolize the city limits, land use, streams and streets feature classes, as well as the DEM and ortho raster datasets from the demo data file geodatabase, and set our geoprocessing environment. Next, we'll select the land use parcels where the field general use ID equals 600 within the city limits, which is the government-owned land. And last, before we perform the suitability analysis, I want you to make your best guess for locating the new composting facility within Sunset Valley city limits. We'll start on Windows Desktop, where I'll open up ArcGIS Pro. I'll create a new map document, and in the new project window, go ahead and rename the project as demo_3-2. I need to browse to my location. I'm going to browse to my course folder. And then inside my course folder, select my demos folder and click OK. And then I'm going to go ahead and create a folder for this local project. Click OK. This creates my ArcGIS Pro project. Maximize ArcGIS Pro. First thing I need to do is add my data. So I'm going to right click on databases and select add database and add my demo data file geodatabase. And then if I expand my demo data file geodatabase, I'll find the Sunset Valley feature dataset. And within the Sunset Valley feature dataset, I'm going to select city limits, land use, streams, and streets, and add those to my map view. I also want to add a couple of raster data sets, the DEM and the ortho, from the demo data file geodatabase. Now that I've added all my data, it kind of looks really messy, so I need to clean up my map view. I'm going to turn off my base map and then update the symbology for each of my layers. Let me go ahead and zoom in to the city limits. And we'll start by updating the streets symbology. So I'll click on the symbology patch. And I'm going to make my streets like a 50% gray and a 0.5 line width. And go ahead and update the streams as well. We'll make them blue to reflect water. For land use, I'm going to change the primary symbology from single symbol to unique values. And then the field to general use ID. And it's using those pastel colors, so I'll switch them to some darker colors. And I want to go ahead and set some layer transparency too. So with land use selected, I'm going to go to feature layer. And on the feature layer ribbon, set the transparency to 50%. Also want to update the symbology for the city limits. This time I'm just going to use the gallery, make it a black outline. It's a little covered up, so I'm going to drag it up to the top. All right, now that we have our symbology set, can you look at the city of Sunset Valley and decide where you might locate the composting facility? If you can't, don't worry, because we're going to perform a suitability analysis. Last, I want to update our geoprocessing environment. So on the analysis ribbon, I'm going to click on the environments button. And then in the environments, I've got my current and scratch workspace set. I also want to set my output coordinate system. And then if I go down to the raster analysis section, set my cell size to same as DEM. And then I want to set my mask to city limits. So all of my output will only be within the city limits. Go ahead and click OK. Now that we have our geoprocessing environment set, let's zoom in and explore our land use data. So if I zoom in on the southern part of Sunset Valley, I can see my general use ID, and I can see, for example, the colors in the map. And that looks like maybe 500 or 200, but I can be sure just by clicking on the parcel. And I can see that the general use ID is 700. So that must be open space. And maybe green is residential, dark green is commercial. And then it looks like to me that our copper color there is going to be general use ID 600 or government property. So I'm going to zoom back to my city limits. And then now we're going to perform our query. So on the map ribbon under the selection group, I'm going to click on select by attributes. And in the select by attributes window, set my input rows as land use, my selection type as new selection, my expression as where, and we want to use general use ID is equal to, and we'll set it to 600. And click OK. And that selects 96 records, both within the city limits and also outside where the government-owned property is. And then we just want the property within the city limits. So we're going to do a second query with the select by location and the input feature set to land use. The relationship is intersect, the selecting features as city limits. And then for selection type, instead of new selection, we're going to select subset from the current selection. Click OK. And that reduces our selection set to 51 government-owned parcels that are within the city limits. All right, I'm going to go ahead and reset my interface, save my ArcGIS Pro project,